Hello and welcome back to my channel, Teresa's Crafty Cabana. Today I'm going to be doing some floral jelly prints. I have these little garden goodies that I picked up. These are some zinnia flowers, some leaves that I had from, I think it was a weed. I have a mother-in-law plant that had these really cool stems. They had little dots on the end of them, so I thought that would look really cool jelly printed. Then I pulled out 3 different sized punches. A 1.5 inch, I think it was a 1 inch and like a 1/2 inch. And I cut 3 different sizes of paper. I've got a 4 inch here. That's going to be for my 1.5 inch. A 2.5 inch will be for my 1 inch. And then for my 1/2 inch, it'll just be a 2 inch piece of paper. So with these, I'm just cutting circles on both sides of the paper. And as I'm punching these, I'm just trying to leave some, area around the circle. And I am able to flip it the other way, and it works out pretty nicely where I get a little bit of some paper left in between. Now you can see there's these little arrows on the side of the punch, and you can line that up with the prior punch, and that will make it so that they're the same distance apart from each other. All 3 of my punches have that, so I thought that was really nice to help me line up my punches. As I was doing this one, I realized I actually wanted my circles sort of like off-centered to each other from one side to the other, so I cut that out. And for this next one, I'm going to do it just a little bit different. I'm starting in the center this time, and then I'll flip it over. And instead of going right across from it, I'm going at an angle on the left and an angle on the right. And then to complete the look here, I'm just going to go back to the other side and cut out like half circles, lining up the little triangles here with the side of the circle. So I like this offset look a little bit better. So that's how I did the rest of my punches. So this is the 1 inch punch. Just kind of went all the way down one side and then did the off-centered punch all the way down the other side. And then I just repeated that same process for the small one. This small one ended up being my favorite size as I started working. It was easier to capture more of these circles on my jelly plate without taking over that much. The medium size was my second favorite, and I didn't actually end up using the larger sized ones, not for this jelly print section anyway, but I can definitely see myself using these as a go-to in the future. So here I have the 3 different sizes. Now on that skinny one, I didn't like that the border was a little bit too wide, so I did trim that down just to kind of make it a little more of a thin border. I have these gallery glass from Plaid paints. So the purpose of these, you're supposed to use them on maybe like acrylic, or they have these sheets. You might have seen me using my big crackle sheet. That's actually, you're supposed to put these paints on that big crackle sheet, let it dry, and then you peel them off. I thought maybe I'd try these on the jelly plate just to see how they would work. I will say they're very shiny and they're very sticky. So some things that were kind of surprising to me as I was working with these. I actually don't recommend using these on the jelly plate, and I only used this one color before I realized that these just were no good for jelly printing, so I didn't end up using any of the other colors on the gel plate. So I am going in and just pressing in my flowers. For the flowers, I just press those down like a stamp. And now for these leaves, I'm just pressing them in with my brayer. And then I have the kind of like the stem part of one of those little things I pulled from my mother-in-law plant. And I just went ahead and made these little stems so that it looked like the flowers had something they were grounded to. Then again, using these little sprouts from the mother-in-law plant that have these little dots on them. I think they look so interesting. I would just went ahead and press those in with my hand this time. And then just to give a little bit of, I wanted a little more like white in the center. I'm using, this is just my Baby Bell piece of packaging that I had cut apart the other day, and just pulling some of the paint away. I let that glass paint dry on the gel plate, and over here on my brayer off sheet I'm mixing some colors. So I have a green color and that burnt umber, and I have this kind of like a vintage whitewash white acrylic. What's nice about this one is it's not a bright white, and it really just tones down your colors without making them too like white. So I think that's a really nice white to work with. And then over my jelly plate, I just kind of went over the stem areas or the green areas on the bottom, and then worked my way to both sides. And then on the top part where all those little flowers are, that's where I'll use the brown color. Again, I wanted to go with neutral colors for these prints. Just wanted to have some kind of natural tones. I didn't bother to clean the green off of my brayer, so a little bit of that green mixed with the brown, but I thought it looked still just fine, and I like the color. I am leaving the center open just a little bit. I did come in with some color, but I will go ahead and try pulling away some more of that color with one of my little circle things that I made right here. And an interesting thing started happening. So I don't know if you can see this, but as I was brayering this away, the paint underneath, the glass paint was doing this really weird thing where it was like almost like fuzzy, coming off of it fuzzy. So I thought I'd use a different texture, this little piece of drywall tape, and I was getting very similar things happening. It was pulling up a lot of the paint, and it was sticky. It was very interesting. I wasn't expecting that. I even tried this bottom of a cup, which normally will make a nice clean circle, but it was pulling up all kinds of stuff. So I let it dry all the way, and then I went in with that vintage white. It's just acrylic. So then I just went ahead and pulled this whole print up because I realized I wasn't going to be able to get really any more texture out of this print, just because it just wasn't working with pulling up those textures. This is copy paper, just the bright white copy paper. I'll put the one that I use in the description. It did pull up nicely, so I was glad that all of that glass paint and everything came up. It still looks interesting to me. It doesn't have a lot of dimension, but I'll deal with that later. For now, I'm going to just keep going. I'm using another brown color here. This is by Windsor Newton. I think this is the burnt sienna. And this is a really pretty, like a warm chocolatey brown color. It did kind of start spilling on me, but I I do love how the coverage of this paint is. I have the Windsor Newton Black, and I think that that one has such great coverage, so I knew the brown would probably do just as well. So I'm going back in with the flower head of the Zinnia, and just kind of using it like a stamp to create some design that looks like a flower garden. And again, I'm using the stem just to create some lines. The greenery, I started brayering this, but I was losing a lot of the paint, and I didn't want to lose that much, so I used my Baby Bell packaging to kind of buffer me, so I wasn't pulling away all the paint. And then I got a design on the gel plate doing it this way. It kind of looked like a basket behind the leaves, so I thought that looked pretty cool. And now I wanted to remove some stuff on the sides here, so I'm using the mother-in-law stems here. And in the center, of course, I still wanted to remove some of the paint there. Again, using the Baby Bell packaging, just kind of pulling up some of that paint. Now the paint is starting to dry. While it was still slightly wet, I just went in with my little brayer, this is my 2-inch brayer, and just kind of made some markings to pull away some of that color. Not all of it, and I wanted to leave some of that texture behind, but I thought that was a nice way to kind of brighten up the center of the page. Here I went in with a coral color over the flowers, and then I did a green over the greenery. This is just like a golden yellow color. It's a matte paint. I used that vintage white, and then this is like a buttercream matte color as well. I'm trying to only get this pink in the flower bud area. Then I've got the white and cream mixture in the center and the yellow, and that just kind of fills in the top portion. And then for the bottom portion, I'm just mixing the yellow with the green just to fill in the rest of the print. This time I'm using a piece of cardstock. This is a 110-pound Neenah white cardstock. And this one looks really cool as well. There's no shine on this one. So the first one was very shiny just because it was those glass paints. This one didn't have shine. So now I'm going to go in with another print. The base layer is going to be a brown. I've got this really light brown and then the raw umber brown. So I'm just kind of mixing the two. The light brown almost looks like an orange to me. This is a really cool leaf. It was from one of my plants at work, and the leaf fell off, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to take this home and jelly print it. So I think it looks pretty neat. And it does a really good job stamping the lines on the one side of the leaf. The other side of the leaf I tried later on, but it didn't work as well as the inside part. So again, I'm using my smaller little circles that I made, and just kind of giving this background some texture. I just really love these circles. I think this is such a fun, easy thing to add some interest to your prints. And then of course I love this drywall tape. Just adding a little bit here and there just creates so much interest and texture. To this one, I'm going to add a little bit of bright gold, iridescent bright gold, and just in some areas, not over the entire background. And I'll use my 2-inch sprayer to just kind of spread that around a little bit. This is a chalkboard paint green that I have. It's kind of like a green apple color. For this print, I'm going to use that same vintage whitewash color. And this is what I'll use to pull up my print. And you can see how that white color, the background starts showing through. So it's not a transparent paint, but it is definitely a little more transparent than some of my really opaque white paints. It kind of reminds me more similar to like how gesso takes on the color underneath it. That's kind of how this paint works. I actually got this paint in a set. It had a set of 4, I think it was from Hobby Lobby, and it had like a sand texture, a vintage whitewash, a vintage gray whitewash, and just a gray color. And the idea is you can make like some whitewashed wood look to your paintings or whatever, or if you were like just painting over wood, you can make it look like it was washed out wood. But I do like using the different colors kind of independently, and it's neat to see how they work on a jelly plate. So I don't think this print dried quite long enough. I did have it drying for about 5 minutes. I think this print needed about 10 minutes. So it had a lot of layers on it. You can see in the center there and on the corner, one side of it, some of the paper kind of peeled off. So I went ahead and just took a paintbrush and put some paint on my brayer off sheet, and I just painted in those white areas, and you can't even tell that they didn't pull up. I guess if you hold it closely you can tell, but once I painted it in, it looked just fine. But I think the texture on this one looks so neat. So you can see all the different layers coming through from the leaf background, and then all the textures kind of in between. So this, I just took some of the lighter brown and the darker brown and mixed them together. And just painted in any white areas that didn't pull up from the plate. And if you didn't know it wasn't there, you probably wouldn't know it unless I tilted it in the light where you can see where I painted it in. But I think this will be just fine. I think it's a beautiful print still. Going back in with my raw umber color, I'm just gonna do the corners for this one and then the opposite corners for my burnt umber or burnt sienna. I think this is the burnt sienna. So for this print, I used the top part of this large leaf, and the top part of this leaf is shiny. It was a little bit harder to get those edges because the edges curled away from the gel plate doing it this way, but it actually made a really neat, I don't know, kind of block of removal of paint. So I thought this was fine using this other side, but I will say my preference is the look of the print on the other side. So the veins just show up better and the edges of the leaf. So for this particular kind of leaf, I would definitely recommend the other way, but this was nice to have a different look to this print using that same leaf. This time I pulled out some of my 3D embossed texture, or not 3D, but embossed textures that I've embossed with my embossing machine. I have all different kinds of texture plates that I've created using my embossed textures and cardstock. This is just 110-pound cardstock. So I just kind of picked out a few that I thought might look nice on the backgrounds here. This is just like a text, like a font. I can't really read it and it's not supposed to be legible, but it just looks like text. Don't know, some of these are not available anymore. Actually most of them aren't, because my embossing collection goes back probably close to 15 or 20 years at this point, so a lot of these aren't available. But you know, you could always look online or on Amazon or a local craft store for just whatever embossing folders are currently available that you think would look good if you jelly printed with them. The nice thing about those embossed textures too is you can use both sides. So you could use the side that just removes the design like I did here, or if you did the opposite side, it would remove a lot more of the paint and then it would leave the opposite. Instead of removing the design, it would leave the design and remove the paint around it. So it's a pretty neat thing to be able to do whichever side of the texture that you want. The only thing is, if you use words, ones that actually have words on them, then you really only have one option. Like I have one that has alphabets on them, so I can only use that texture one way, or else they'll be backwards on the gel plate. So, but for all the other ones, I have both options. I did go in with more of my textures, just like the last print, and I am removing some of that paint in the center here. This is sort of like a fall texture embossing folder that I had picked up from Joann's, and I think this one was one of my newer textures that I had purchased. So this one might still be available at Joann's. It was their brand, but it was a very nice, like just a delicate design with some leaves and some kind of like spirals and stuff. Going in with neutral colors here. So this is my gold. Then I've got some of the vintage white, I think it is, and then the cream colors. Oh, no, I did the parchment white. Sorry, the parchment white. I did the cardstock again, so the 110-pound cardstock. I left this one for quite a while. I just didn't want it to do the same thing the prior print had done. And this one pulled up all of the paint and it dried nicely. So that one also pulled up what was left over on the plate from the prior print. And I think that that one has lots of texture as well. So for this last print here, this is actually going to get layered on top of the first print that I did. So if you remember, that was the glass paint and it didn't have a lot of dimension. It was the green and kind of like the orangey brown color. So I really liked how these two browns really were working together. So I decided to do a layer of this with some textures over the top and then just pull that right over the top of that first print. Put my fan on this one to get it to dry a little bit. And you can see how much better this print looks just by adding this layer on top of it. It still has a little bit of that shininess to it from the glass paint, but it looks so much better. I wanted some gold accents, so I just went in with gold on my plate, and I'm just using some of my textures to remove some of that paint with the circles and the drywall tape and the embossing folders. Well, embossed cardstock. While the paint is still wet, I'll just put that print right on the top. And this is just going to make it have some more of the gold accents that I felt like it was missing. This is, I believe, my second print, and I put those gold accents right over my second print just to give that additional layer. I liked that so much that I did another one for one of my other prints. Okay, and here are the gold accents layered on top of this one, and I just think these prints just look so nice. They're neutral tones. They would make a great background. You could layer colors up on top of these with embellishments or different different types of maybe tags and things. I think this one's probably my favorite, even though it used that glass paint that I wasn't too sure about just how this one came together and finished. I think it just looks so neat. And I really like this one too because it has the light brown in the one corner and then the dark brown in the other areas. So I just think it has a lot of interest, and I like how the textures look on here. So these are my 4 prints for my print session today. Which one was your favorite? I really, like I said, I like this one at the top left. Really catches my eye, and it has kind of the warmer tones in it. But I really did like playing around with, removing some of the paint, working with the different textures, layering up different layers on the plate. So I like playing around like this when I'm trying to just learn more about how the Gelli print works with layers and colors and textures. So hopefully this inspires you to try some new textures on your Gelli plate, or maybe inspires you to go out to your garden and pull some cool looking leaves and flowers and see what you come up with. Well, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Happy crafting!